tore this out of Consumer Magazine for the August issue, this August, which talked about the mud legislation, and in it said that at long last a comprehensive framework is set to cater for the specific needs of apartment owners in multi-unit developments. Vital that they move swiftly now through the door and channel and are not watered down, these legislation, these provisions, as a result, not watered down as a result of pressure from vested interests or lack of political will. Now, they then goes on to describe the measures that the bill is introducing, and it starts off with the obligation to establish a management company. Well, I think most of us know that in most of the developments we manage, the obligation or the management company is being set up. And I don't want to undermine now any of the provisions in the bill. I've said before, I think some of the legal provisions are terrific. But it then says, I'm just talking about in the context of this article, it then says that from now on there will be a transparent basis for the fairly apportioned service charges. And it doesn't mention anything about the difficulty in recovering service charges, the difficulty that we don't get counterpart leases, which are vital to the recovery, that we can't serve writs on landlords who live abroad or who live in Portugal and own 30 or 40 apartments in some of these developments, and all the difficulties in the recovery of service charges when people are now going to suffer from negative equity, and we're actually going to have to provide in those budgets for an additional fund to cover the cost of owners who can't pay or won't be able to pay until they can dispose of their property or whatever. So it also talks about sinking funds and mandating €200, and that's terrifically valuable to people who want to think in the future for their development. And then it talks about house rules and the fact that people will be allowed to create new house rules or additional house rules at an AGM, and that they can. And the suggestion there is that breaches of house rules, noise complaints will be addressed, and no longer will we have to put up with the difficulties that we have sometimes living beside people who cause abuse to the building. That will all be fixed now because we'll be able to create new house rules. But it doesn't say anything about any means to sanctions to address those house rules, or sanctions to address antisocial behaviour, which is becoming a huge thing now in society in our developments, even in the very best of our developments, unfortunately. And then the final thing it presents as a great consumer benefit is the resolution of disputes. So now we have all the problems, and we're now getting a means to address those disputes. Well, I read this article and I was terribly disappointed because it didn't even touch on the real problems, and it also represented, to my mind, the real issue. Two issues. One is that the complexity of the problems is very hard for anybody, even someone living in an apartment, to understand the length and breadth of all the problems and the interconnections of them all. And then it's also very difficult, I think, for anybody not living in an apartment to imagine what it's like, what's going on. So I just think if you imagine an AGM in a development, and this is not a made-up story, it is happening, where within a development over the first year or two, and maybe I put all the problems into one development just for the purposes of collating a story, but there's a structural defect, there's unfinished work, the developer won't pay his contribution in service charges for the units that he currently owns, which are enjoying the benefits of the services in the development, a big problem, and much bigger now that the poor guys are on their own knees. The fire safety is not assured. We have people very concerned ringing up saying, my fire alarm is going off every second and third night, and we're all ignoring it. We have other owners who are saying, can somebody verify to me that this place is built properly? Because I'm very concerned with, and Pat mentioned that people get a bit bothered about structural cracks, the settlement cracks. But in fact, it sort of is a means for them to manifest their concerns about a number of things, and that's something very definite they can put a name to. And remember, these are very ordinary people; they don't know anything necessarily about building technology, but they can see that that's an issue, and then that leads them to think that because there's no real means for verification of their estate, that there are much more hidden problems than just that. There's no process for the delivery of the estate management documentation, which I mentioned earlier, and there's no process for snagging. I mean, it's a good act active owners in estates with usually a professional agent such as somebody here who engages the likes of Pat to do a snagging report, and it's a proactive, responsible professional developer who will take that list on board and do some of the work in it. But imagine an estate where all those problems exist and all those people with all their different issues arrive at an AGM. And then now the new legislation says that the budget we have worked on, and we've worked out how much the lifts cost and how much the gardening is going to cost this year, and somebody wanted extra bedding plants, we put that in, and somebody thinks the windows really should be cleaned 3 times a year, not twice a year, and so we put that, and we've worked out as best we could, down to the last penny, what the budget should be. And we arrive into the room and we present that budget to this bunch of owners, and we're very professional in our presentation, and the bunch of owners don't even want to talk about the budget. They want to kill us because there's unfinished building work, there's no means for them to be assured that the development is built right. And by the way, last night they were told by the developer that he handed it over. And they say, what? And somebody says, well, I was talking to the developer yesterday, and he said he was in his solicitor's office yesterday and he signed over the development. He's actually done the conveyance of the common areas, so they're now ours. And then there's a group in the room who stands up and says, this is brilliant, we've got control, we own now the common areas. We can fix everything now that we're in control. And they go down to the company's office and they get themselves put onto the board of directors. And they think, do you know what, this fella up there at the front, he's talking about the budget, sure, he knows nothing, we'll fire him. And then we'll get in our own agent, not the agent from the developer, but our own agent. He might have got us a few extra things from the developer, and he might say, look, we're getting a good deal or whatever, we've got a new gate when we didn't have a gate or something. But we'll just fire him because we don't like him, he was appointed by the developer, and we'll go off and get our own agent, and then we'll have all the problems fixed. And so they go off and they get their own agent. And then about 3 months later, they realise that the problems are actually still there. They now have control, they have a new agent, but the problems are still there. And then everybody's a bit tired, they're worn out, and they start living with the defects in the building and the few bits falling off. And then somebody else comes in and says, look, there's an economic downturn, a lot of us have been made redundant, we can't really afford to maintain this place, and let's cut the service charges as low as possible. One of my staff members yesterday referred to a client committee who, very active, and a new person demanded to be on that board and on the committee, and they invited them in, welcomed them, and he said, look, I think, you know, with the situation now, we need to cut off at least €500 off the service charges of 1,500, whatever they were. And he said, the first thing I think we should do is cut out all that fire safety costs. We don't need that. The place is built of concrete, we don't need any fire safety measures, cut them out. Now, fortunately, the clients in particular didn't push too much heat in them, but they had difficulty dealing with them. So you can imagine what I've just described to you. I'm sure all of you in residential multi-unit development have experienced something like that, and it may be putting all of the mad scenarios that can happen in the one development. But the reality is many of those situations do arise, and what I'm trying to get to is that if we are to deliver a very professional property management service, which really is the aspiration of many of us, then we need to be delivered a product which is built correctly, which has appropriate logbooks and warranties and guarantees that come with it, which is finished off and certified to the occupier's reasonable satisfaction, and then there's an appropriate list of tasks that we should be involved with, for which we get an appropriate fee, and for which, out of which we actually make a little bit of a profit. So I think that scenario right now, unless the product is delivered to us properly, we are going to have continuous consumers' complaints about the issues that are going on, and we're never going to be able to satisfy those consumers in a service delivery. They are going to be way too irate to be listening to us telling them what they should be putting into their budget when they're actually dealing with much more significant problems. And the final thing I would say, last week a client of ours, very concerned about a building defect, and in this case the developer is in the courts and is about to disappear off the poor man, but they decided to go to the media with their problem as a means to maybe find a means of recourse or a resolution. And by going to the press, they have they are getting some assistance from the local authorities. But what has happened though is 4 apartments that were about to be sold, the buyers pulled out of the purchase. And also, the insurance company arrived down to do a risk assessment on the site, wanted to know what on earth was this all about, and that they were going to put the premium up. So, out of that, you learn that people have to keep secret, actually. We see an awful lot of developments where people keep secret their problems. because if they at all mention them, they will undermine the value of their property, which is now already suffering from very serious problems. So anyway, I believe that the IPFMA have a role to ensure that, and we all have a role to ensure that the consumer is protected. And we may all discuss here whose responsibility is what, whether it's local authority or IHBA or our own profession or the solicitors or whoever. But at the end of the day, if we don't all together protect the consumer and protect the whole model of apartment living, which, as Jim said, the numbers required in housing stock in the future years is very significant. If we don't protect it going forward, well, actually, we're doing a disservice to the consumer, but we're also destroying the very industry that developers depend on and that we all depend on. So I'll end on the note that I hope everybody will take the issues they've learned about today and do something about them. Thanks very much.
Thanks for that, Siobhan. It's my pleasant duty to just